Nowadays, it can feel as if games are obsessed with telling you too many of their secrets. As gaming grows out of the weird esoteric phase dating back to the ancestor consoles of the 20th century, the amp up on things such as required tutorials and in-game guide menus can really take out some of the enjoyment in finding what lies beneath their surface. Because of this, hearing about concepts after the fact that developers manage to sneak past us and influence our experiences can be ridiculously exciting to finally notice. So that's why today, let's throw some love to 7 hidden details and features, in particular, that really show how developers hack our playstyle without us even knowing. Hey all you secret spies and cool guys, I'm Skip the Tutorial, and this is Game Bites, an appreciation anthology of the best bits of design that gaming has to offer. And hey, if this is your first time here, then make sure to search out that subscribe for weekly insights into your favorite things about gaming. Overwatch enemy sounds. Jeff Kaplan's stated goal for the audio team on Blizzard's 2016 release of Overwatch was the ability to play the whole game with a monitor turn off. And as implausible as that direction might seem, the devs actually covered a lot of ground in approaching this reality. Chief among which is the enemy prioritization sound system, known in-house as the Important System. In an effort to keep players safe from unwarranted deaths, as the flanking McCree's footsteps are drowned out by the sounds of your Reinhardt allies' attacks, Overwatch's audio engineers chose to side their HDR, or high dynamic range audio mix, to dole out importance points based on how likely a threat is in proportion to you, to make sure that players can always pick up on the most important details. The audio player systematically adjusts based on essentially how big you are in the enemy player's screen. So if a foe is nearby but goofing off and keeping you out of their vision, their prioritization will fall into the middle tier of priority. Whereas an enemy who is several meters further from you, but trying to lock headshots, is blasted to the top of your eardrums. From here, the system then buckets these different sound effects into separate levels from the importance data. Here's an example the team demonstrated at GDC. Notice how the audio differs between when the Reapers switch from enemy to friendly. And likewise, their importance and threat level to you drops. Now, where I think the real beauty of this system stands out is in how subtle these changes can be, yet still provide a huge amount of conveyed information to the player. Although there are some examples of sounds that don't rely on the system as much, such as ultimate callouts, since their importance to a match is pretty big. I think the way this prioritization is implemented gives an elegant solution to what could have just been otherwise a 6v6 headphone blasting cacophony. Doom 2016's health bar ticks. Surviving on your last leg can be a blast. There's plenty of thrill to squeezing your controller while on the edge of your seat, just trying to make it out of the difficult section without a retry. Some games work to create this feeling through tough as nails enemies that keep you gasping for air. But when it comes to titles like id Software's recent Doom, sometimes developers will sneak in a little bit of extra design to keep you in that state. Within the game, you have a life bar presented on your heads-up display's bottom left corner. Pretty standard stuff. However, the secret genius here is that last tick of life juice on your indicator isn't worth the same amount as other bits on the life bar. Instead, that final segment is actually valued significantly higher than any of the visually comparable pieces. So what this means is that when you're close to bottoming out, the game plays a slight trick on you to make you feel just that little bit closer to death. And from this, the system can drive a lot of the same decisions that often arise when a player is close to a respawn for an effectively larger period of time. Worth noting here is that this detail partners beautifully with the game's glory kill system, which stems from driving enemies to a stagger with your weaponry before sailing in close for a final melee blow. And since these bloodbath finishing moves always net some health, a worried player is therefore pushed to the more exhilarating moments of offense. In sum, this sweet little lie that the developers hide from you works to keep you in the most exciting stories the game system have to offer, and comes together to give the extra bit of inevitable joy to just nearly making it out of your demise. Silent Hill Shattered Memories' AI senses. In a game that warns you that it plays you just as much as you play it, you can be sure that there's plenty of subtle tweaks going on within the lines of code. Partner this with the fact Sam Barlow headed up this one, and Silent Hill Shattered Memories is packed to the brim with hidden features and details. A personal favorite of mine, and one that Barlow isn't afraid to share himself, is the concept of the AI dumbing down, particularly through the removal of senses in the game's monsters each time you respawn. So, for example, a struggling player would have their nightmare's key awareness bits systematically eliminated until they can finally take on the challenge properly. By removing smell, then hearing, and then messing with their sight, the developer's intention here was to make these sequences scary, but not overwhelmingly difficult. This isn't the only sneaky detail they chucked into the AI, with features such as only 2 things being allowed to chase you at once, and the foes slowing down when you check over your shoulder so that they appear right at your tail. But I think this one in particular really goes to show the importance of fairness within a game designer's job, even if the atmosphere is supposed to be grueling and terrifying. Although it's a system that can potentially be exploited for easier runs, and any players that choose to repeat these sections might think this system is just a bad or stupid AI, it's the weight that Barlow puts on first-time player experience that really makes it something special, and definitely worth some praise when peeking under the hood. Pac-Man's ghost behavior. It's odd to think that one of the most iconic titles in gaming is still able to keep some cards up its sleeve all the way since the 80s. But sure enough, creator Toru Iwatani designed the ghosts in the game to keep us all on our toes. Within the files of the arcade classic, each of the game's 4 ghosts is designed with their own movement patterns and behavioral quirks that maintain some freshness to the gameplay. Iwatani's reasoning for this was that he wanted each ghostly enemy to have a specific character and its own particular movements, so they weren't all just chasing after Pac-Man in single file, which would have been tiresome and flat. So with that, we get the ghosts of Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde, all described to their personalities as Shadow, Speedy, Bashful, and Pokey, respectively. This is why the red ghost will chase down your current title as soon as possible, making him the earliest threat, but also short-sighted in his planning that allows him to eventually lose the fellow. The pink ghost, which also has the misnomer Speedy in the English version, but the speed is actually the same as the other ghosts. Regardless, this phantom is characterized by targeting the tile the player is moving towards, rather than where they've been. Inky, or the blue ghost, probably has the most difficult to predict vectors in the game, since his supposed bashful nature is relying both on the player's position and orientation, in tandem with how Blinky, or the red ghost, moves. And finally, the goofiest of the bunch in Clyde, aka the orange ghost, balances between the lock-on sight system of Blinky when he's away from the player, but then starts to throw in all kinds of zigzags and lollygagging when he gets close. Overall, I think Iwatani does a great job here in throwing us off the game's 4 ghost scent with the variations these different enemies have, creating an ever-shifting battlefield of foes to continually reconsider your way around for the pellets is a lot of fun, and I'd argue the chief reason this game is still so legendary to this day. Keep talking and nobody explodes distractions. This game is a manic test of friendship that does an astounding job of milking high tension out of the seemingly mundane. I mean, any game that's able to get you screamingly nervous over a tragic lack of communication over some weird triangle tentacle looking symbol is worthy of that praise. But where the game really takes an interesting exploration into all of this, in my mind, is with the purposeful inclusion of distractions. As developer Ben Kane states, distractions like the alarm clock are based on how well you're doing. Makes last second defusals more likely. This small feature covers a lot of distance in how it plays out real time. While it's easy to sit here and say that an alarm clock really wouldn't be that distracting, in a game, especially a VR functionality one, where every second counts, taking a bit of time to look at that can send an excelling team to a crashing loss. On top of this, Kane's philosophy here of driving last second defuses is huge in building this game's reputation of high octane craziness that eventually gives some largely satisfying payoffs. So while the little noises and side details in the room might seem random or just unnecessary filler, it's the way the team uses them to accomplish these hilariously awesome moments that really makes playing the game, especially with your closest and loudest pals, a blast. Furi's last boss phase. Scoring a high-stakes win against a big baddie is not to be understated, and no one understands this better than the Game Maker's very own Emmerich Thoa, who stated that within Furi, the final phase of the game's centerpiece boss fights is purposely designed to be lower difficulty with a higher emphasis to the visuals. This approach fascinates me, since most bosses you play in games would lead you to believe that the designers see proper difficulty as a steadily increasing slope. But loosening the reins on these final bits can produce some interesting impacts on the player's connection with the gameplay. For one, it builds a sense that the boss is in some form of desperation phase, where they lash out in one last weekend hurrah of their final resort before finally being taken down. Moreover, this develops a sense within the player that they're improving over the course of the fight, since as they reach the close, it feels more as though the power begins to shift to your established skills. And don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of challenge to be found in Furi as a whole regardless. Even the decrease in difficulty here is mostly comparative, and has plenty of capability to send you back for a retry. But ultimately, I think what the team expertly discovers here is that there's plenty of power to create moments in gaming past just barely surviving through some juiced up foe. Instead, flipping the script so that the player can score some taste of an all-important power trip and truly feel like the boss-destroying machine the game asks them to become. Spider-Man vocal change. There's a lot to love in Insomniac's Sony-exclusive Spider-Man title. So much care and detail went in from the studio to create a truly superb experience here. And while some of those might have been removed post-launch, my favorite of this game's subtle details lies in the way the developers play around with voice actor Yuri Lowenthal's portrayal of the titular hero. As anyone who spent some time in the game knows, it's not uncommon to spend your fair share of time simply swinging through the various buildings of Manhattan. And from there, I'd also be fairly certain that you've had a fair share of time listening to the different scripted communicator conversations that Spidey has with the other characters. But what I find fascinating about Insomniac's team handles what could have just been run-of-the-mill lines of dialogue is that they seamlessly switch between different recorded takes depending on whether or not the hero is exerting himself. Take a listen to the differences in the same conversation you have with MJ in the game.
Yeah, he was unusually combative. Anyway, thanks again for dinner. What do I owe you? Yeah, he was unusually combative. Anyway, thanks again for dinner. What do I owe you?
On top of being just an impressive performance on Lowenthal's part, this also shows the insane amount of consideration the folks working on the game put into its design. Quite honestly, it's a feature I'm certain that I wouldn't have noticed if it was gone, since I'd have been too busy delivering pizzas or something to even pick up on it. But all in all, if you ask me, the truly special pieces of work that we're exposed to, be it movies, games, what have you, are the ones that take the supplementary little steps that eventually add up to their own extra mile. Hey there, investigate this one up in the top right for the 7 most scrumdiddlyumptious food-centric designs in gaming. Or discover this one down in the bottom right for another video. If you want to support the channel and score new uploads every week, then tell your secrets to that subscribe button, and I promise it'll absolutely keep them, and let you know about future Game Bites episodes. But until then, take care, and you have a good one, alright?